2, check 1, 2. Nate Jones to Chris Shalene, check 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. Check 1, 2, check 1, 2. Chris Shalene, can you hear me? Hello, hello. Hello, hello. Check 1, 2, check 1, 2. Check 1, 2. Please give me a thumbs up, Chris, when you are ready for me to end the mic check. Keep going. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Check 1, 2. Check 1, 2, 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3, 4. Chris Shalene, can you hear me? Okay, I'm continuing to talk. Put me on the spot here. Check 1, 2. Check 1, 2, 3. Oh, you're asking the wrong person. I'm tone dead. Are we good? Okay, we're good.
We're working on it. Test.
Testing. Okay, guys, you ready to count us in? Okay, we're live. Okay, I certainly want to thank all of our folks for being here. We may have maybe a handful of staff who missed a couple of the 7 other presentations we've had on compensation. And we're certainly going to talk about compensation, but I want to, it's in the very beginning part of this conversation, because it is a conversation, to talk about anything that's on your mind. I do 4 regional conversations throughout the year, and I just show up in the region and ask our colleagues, our teaching, support, administrative staff members, ProTech, to come out and let's just hold a conversation. And how many folks, this is your first time here at one of these conversations on compensation, by show of hands? So 2. And our other folks, I want to thank you for coming out, being outstanding facilitators. So give yourselves a round of applause of your dedication. You've done like 20 of these within the last 2 years. Oh, thanks, God. Look at God. I tell you, we got great people here. So again, quick introduction. Since we only have a few people here, we'll go ahead and run through some introductions. And really, I'll go through the groundwork. It's really about holding a conversation about compensation and a myriad of other things that may be on your mind. So we'll go ahead and we want each person here to introduce him or herself. And I know for the edification of our folks who are here. So for the edification of our folks who are here, we'll start with Mary.
I'm Mary Chesla. I'm the Director of Compensation and Human Resources.
I'm Scott Smith, Chief Financial Officer.
I'm Glenn Kirby, and I'm one of the electricians for the school district.
I'm Deanna Kirby, the Director of Educator Effectiveness.
Chris Lawson, I work in IT as a project manager.
I'm Jacqueline Van Oyek. I'm a math teacher at Castleview High School.
Hey, I'm Marlena Gross-Taylor. I'm Chief Academic Officer.
Hello, I'm John Veit, principal at Castle Rock Middle School. Thanks for everyone being here.
I'm Dan Singleton. I'm a history teacher at Thunder Ridge High School.
I'm Katie Lawson. I'm the assistant principal at Castle Rock Elementary.
Rex Core, principal, Castleview High School.
Erin Carlson, principal at Southridge Elementary.
And Cole Crinholm, assistant principal at Southridge Elementary.
And we have Sean in the back. Sean, you want to wave? Okay. On September 20th, we had the wonderful experience of officially launching the district strategic plan. From thousands of surveys and hundreds of conversations with students, and the whole research process with our strategic plan began with students, staff, community members, the board, certainly folks in the businesses around here, the business representatives around the Douglas County, and obviously the folks who represent both the local, state, and we actually had a conversation with one of our federal lawmakers. So we spoke with folks across the entire spectrum, and many of the folks who are taking part in live streaming tonight had an opportunity to weigh in on the shaping of our strategic plan. And the strategic plan really is a blueprint, a guiding light, if you will, of what are some of the things that represent some of the things that are going to take place in the district for the next 5 years. It is a living document. You've heard Marlena talk about that quite a bit. It's a living document, and we're going to shape that document to really adhere and address the immediate short-term and long-term needs of our district. So again, we certainly want to thank everyone for your input in that. And one of the 6 themes that emerged, and it's going to be the theme that we're going to talk about mostly tonight, is that we're going to recruit, retain, and develop high-quality employees. Recruit, develop, and retain high-quality employees. And we want to, in that, we want to make sure that we create a predictable, consistent system of compensation, attract additional top talent. We certainly have top talent throughout the district. We have approximately 8,400 full-time and part-time colleagues here in the district. So again, attracting top talent, and we want to ensure that feels as if he or she is valued. Again, this particular strategic thing did not come from what I say were top things that need to happen here in the district. By the way, the 16, they're not necessarily in order tonight. We're just talking about strategic theme 6. Again, recruitment, retention, and development of high-quality employees. I'm going to share with you my yearbook picture from the early 80s, from 1984. And to the left here, I'll start with my high school faculty, and to the right, my elementary faculty of my school district back in Arkansas. And you're probably saying, well, Thomas, you know, why are you sharing that with us? I'm going to tell you a little story about the importance of teachers. And when I say teachers, I mean support staff as well. If you look there, you'll see our nurses, custodial staff, teachers, administrators across the board. These folks were instrumental in shaping my life. Next to my parents, they were the greatest influence in my life to become an educator and not pursue some other profession. I rarely get to, I'm a superintendent. I always say that I'm a teacher, and I'm a teacher on special assignment. My teachers shaped my life. There are a couple folks in here who were custodians. They shaped my life. Many of you know, after my high school practice, I played sports year-round. After practice, I was a custodian at my high school. When I left and went to college, after I found out that I wasn't going to be a great football star at the Ohio State University, you know, I went to college and I worked hard, and to help pay for my tuition, I was a custodian during the first 2 years before I became an assistant to one of the professors. And so I have a great deal of compassion and a great deal of appreciation for what educators have done for me. They were my dream keepers. When I was young, I didn't know what I wanted to do, but I had a whole lot of dreams. And they helped me prepare me for this particular day. And that's the role that you all have. And I certainly want to share those thoughts with our community about our board. Our board has that as well. And they want to make sure that we retain and that we keep the best staff we have, and we show our appreciation for you. So again, each one of you for being outstanding dream keepers and helping to hold up those dreams for our young people. So within the strategic plan, there are several initiatives for each one of the strategic initiatives. And some of these initiatives that we're working on right now, we're focusing on. And so let's take a look at Strategic Initiative 1A under recruitment, retention, and development of high-quality employees. Again, when we say employees, we mean teachers, support staff, administrators. Each one of our colleagues, we want to make sure that we invest in you, and you in turn invest in our students. And how we're going to do that, we're going to develop and recommend a predictable compensation schedule for all employee groups that acknowledges experience, longevity, knowledge, and performance. As you all know, I was circa 2012, and folks, please correct me if I'm off on a year or two, that our school community decided to cut its ties with the collective bargaining agreement, and within the collective bargaining agreement, obviously you had a pay schedule. That pay schedule was discontinued as well. And we created a system that really caused quite a bit of inequities. Your Board of Education, your administrative team, your cabinet team are all committed to restoring a very predictable compensation schedule, one that we can afford. Now here's a caveat. Again, it took several years to get rid of those things here, to get rid of the collective bargaining agreement and to get rid of the pay scale. And I ask you all for some patience because it's going to take us a while to do that. You also know November of last year, of 18, marked the first time in 12 years that we were able to go to our awesome voters here in Douglas County to get local money in the form of an MLO and the form of a bond. And so, and we've used much of that money, and we spent that money extremely well, and Scott Smith, our CFO, is going to talk a little bit about that later and how well we are utilizing the funds that you gave us last November. In addition, it should be easily comparable to neighboring school districts, this pay scale, that we should be comparable to neighboring school districts. I didn't say we're going to be way below. I didn't say we're going to be way high, that we're going to be comparable to neighboring school districts. And progressively means over a period of time that we're going to move toward a regional competitive pay for all employees. Now, here are some of the compensation values and resolutions that our board passed in the 18-19 school year, and I'm going to highlight a few of these things here. Our types of resolutions, they passed a compensation resolution. Really, again, we have a great medical benefits plan for our employees and to our community and our folks who are out there part of the live stream. We certainly appreciate your support in giving us a great benefits plan and helping to close the range. So quickly, a few of the values and resolutions here. Again, the predictable compensation schedule that acknowledges the things I just said, comparable to neighboring districts, and an important part here, and that's why we're here tonight. I know this group here as well. We need feedback and input from employees. We had 9 of these meetings scheduled. We were fortunate enough to complete 7 of them. 2 of them were canceled due to inclement weather, and we're using tonight's meeting as a makeup meeting. We really value your input. Additionally, I have 3 more regional meetings set up to talk with staff about compensation and anything else that they want to talk about. Again, our voice, your administrative team, all value staff input. Then another important thing here, it needs to reflect research. Our compensation structure needs to reflect research and best practices for ensuring equity and employee satisfaction. If you really want to make your students happy, family happy, ensure that your employees, your colleagues are happy. And so we want to have a great compensation structure, but we also want to create that climate, that culture that's conducive for folks providing their voices and lending their voices, and also having a stake and having an ownership in the district. And so we want to make sure that we're doing that along with compensation. And again, equity. You know, I don't want to spend much time talking about this, but it's important. Equity is huge in our district, how we treat people, how we associate people, and I'm not just talking about compensation is huge. We know when you don't have a sustainable pay structure for 5, 6+ years, inequities are going to happen. And so I want to applaud the board and my administrative team, the cabinet, for doing its very best in trying to close those gaps. Last year, our staff several increases in their wages, I should say. Was it enough? No, but it was our first step in the direction to make it more equitable. Thanks, Scott. And there are 2 major considerations, financial considerations and feedback and research. Again, talking about the whole business of ensuring folks have an opportunity to lend your voice to the district. Again, we don't want to be in a position where we're doing things to people. We want to ensure we're doing this together. We're improving our district one day at a time together. Quickly, financial consideration, and Scott will get into this. He'll give us some numbers here a little later. The Douglas County School District and all 178 of the public school districts across the great state of Colorado are dependent on state funding to implement their structure and to maintain their pay structure. Given that the Douglas County School District is dependent on the level of state funding, again, like other school districts, any changes to a compensation structure may need to be phased in over a period of time. Notice we talked about being progressive over a period of time. And it may take multiple years. Again, we didn't get to this situation here overnight, and we're not going to get out of it overnight. But I want to again assure you we are definitely committed to creating a very fair pay structure and ensuring you have a voice in the process. And it must be affordable and sustainable. Why create a pay structure if we cannot afford it? So we need to be pragmatic. And next, feedback and research. We have worked with our employee council, and you'll hear Mary Chesler talk about the employee council here in a little bit. We've also had a very, very brilliant, very sharp consultant working with us, working with staff to ensure that we're looking at salary schedules across the Front Range, across the state. And we need to look at licensed employee experience and transcripts. These are some of the things that we're going to consider, as well as these input sessions that I made reference to that we've had and that we'll continue to have. And lastly, the foundational work with the Employee Council, we want to thank you for that. We have a very active Employee Council with members representing all employee groups across our great district. So thank you for your time with that. Now I'll ask our Chief Financial Officer, our CFO, Scott Smith, to come forward. He's going to give us some information on the governor's budget. Let's give Scott a round of applause.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Tucker. I think what Dr. Tucker said is really important, that we want to make sure whatever we do is sustainable and that we can afford it. One thing I want to make sure everyone understands is that we are incredibly grateful for the 2018 mill levy that was approved by the voters, but that money has already been allocated out and spent. We put $17 million into employees' paychecks starting in January and applied that retroactively to the beginning of the school year. We went out and hired 85 new counselors at the elementary level and the secondary level as well. We put about $7 million in school budgets, trying to make sure that the way we fund our schools is equitable and making sure that we recognize that our schools have different needs and different challenges and that the funding reflects those needs and challenges that our schools have. We still have a ways to go, but as Dr. Tucker said about compensation, this was the first big bite of the apple. We put $2 million into career and technical education as well. That was one of the commitments we made to voters. And then we passed through 100% on a per pupil basis to our charter schools as well. So all $40 million of that mill levy money is spent. It is gone. So we are dependent on state funding for any new initiatives. And we use state funding for everything. So whether it's just our general compensation increases that we give at the beginning of the year, if we have caseload growth in special education, if we want to look at anything with employee benefits, if we want to add programming, whatever it may be. It's also the funding source that we'll use to fund the strategic plan. So whether there are different elements of the strategic plan, as Dr. Tucker talked about, or changing pay structure. And I often get the question of, well, why does it cost money to change pay structure? And what I always say is that if we assume, which is a guarantee for us, that we're not going to cut from one employee to give to another, right? We're not going to lower someone's salary to increase someone else's, so that's off the table. If we're going to change pay structures, that means the only thing that can happen is that some people's pay has to go up because other people's pay isn't going down. And some people have said, well, why do people's pay need to change? Well, if you don't change anyone's pay, you haven't changed your pay structure behind it. So there's only a cost associated with that. So that goes back to Dr. Tucker's point of we need to make sure this is sustainable, and we didn't get here overnight, and we're not going to change this overnight, but we need feedback from employees on what does a new salary schedule need to look like? What would a reasonable implementation plan look like, understanding the financial challenges that we have, and the financial challenges that, quite frankly, the state of Colorado has as a whole when it comes to K-12 education. We're not unique in the funding challenges that we have in our district when it comes to state funding. The governor proposed his budget for next school year in November. The governor proposed the budget, but the legislature is the one who sets it. Unfortunately, usually school finance goes last in the legislature, so we usually don't find out till April or early May what funding really looks like. But usually it doesn't deviate tremendously from what the governor has requested. I think the thing to point out here is that what the governor has proposed is the smallest increase to K-12 in 3 years. So 2 years ago, we got about $450 more per student in new money. This year was about $350 a student. Next year, what's proposed is $200 a student. So the increases are getting smaller. And what I tell folks is that this is still in a time of economic expansion, right? We're not in a recession. We're not seeing revenues to the state reduced. But the increase to K-12 is getting smaller and smaller every year. And so we need to be very prudent with the money that we do have, because I said that pays for everything. And we want to make sure we value our existing employees. We want to make sure that we address any caseload growth that we need to address. There's a whole myriad of things that our district spends money on, and largely it's people, but there are other things as well. And so we just want to make sure we have an honest conversation with folks that, this is not where we were 2 years ago, that the revenue picture is changing, and that's going to be a real impact on what we're able to do with salary schedules or changing compensation structures. And that's why we would ask that you partner with us and help us to develop what does a timeline for a phase-in look like? What are the logical steps that we could take 1, 2, 3 years to start getting into a new structure? Again, it took 6 or 7 years to get here. We're not going to get out of here on July 1st of next year when our next school year starts. So we just want to make sure folks understand that, and we have a conversation around what our funding realities are, because that is our reality and what we have to live in as we go into next school year. So that I will turn it over to Mary Chesla, Director of Compensation.
Thank you, Scott. So this is a snapshot of part of the process that we've been working on in trying to evaluate our compensation structure and make the changes that the board has asked us to make. Right now we're in phase 3, way over at the far right side of the slide. What have we been doing while we've been getting this work done? We have been diligently working to examine the education and experience levels of our teachers so that we can do proper placement on a new salary schedule. We have been working with our compensation consultant to compare Douglas County with our neighboring districts and how they compensate their teachers, so that we can more closely assess what it's going to take for us to meet the board resolution and make sure that we're compensating as they expect us to compensate in a way that's comparable to our neighboring districts. So looking ahead, starting with December, where we are now, here's what's going to happen. We're working with the Employee Council. We'll be bringing them the experience and education information that we've gathered that took many, many months to gather from our teachers and evaluate. We have worked with the Employee Council to show them what structures look like in other school districts so they know what the target looks like for us, since it's been a long time since we've had a traditional salary schedule for teachers. We're working with finance, with Scott and his team, to make sure that, as Dr. Tucker said, any particular schedule that we put together is both affordable and sustainable. Those are 2 words you will hear over and over again while we do this important work. So from now until April, along with Scott, we'll all be monitoring the governor's budget. You can do that as well. We'll be working on a proposal that we can phase in over time that will get teachers to where they should be eventually. The superintendent is going to continue his regional listening sessions throughout the district so that we can hear from more of our teachers about what's important to them in the way of compensation. We'll be providing the board an update on strategic item number 6 in the strategic plan as we have more information to share with them. And then in the spring, we expect to be able to provide our employees with their new salaries for the 2021 school year. We'll be issuing contracts like we do every spring to our teachers so that they'll be working under a contract just like they always have. And we will begin to review the other employee groups. And I say begin now, but we have been looking at the other employee groups. Our compensation consultant has given us a lot of data on other employee groups so that we can start that work, and some of it's been started behind the scenes, but there'll be more of a focus on it once we've completed the work on the licensed salary schedule. And now it's time for conversation with Dr. Tucker.
Thanks, Mary. That sounds like a TV show, Conversation with Dr. Tucker. Okay. Anyone, let's open up the floor. Very, very informal conversations. Tell you what, tell me something after we discuss any questions or concerns relative to compensation. Tell me something that I may not know that I should know. Could be something happening in your building or your department. And I have gifts too. I have Growing Together pens, and our three building educators just received our Growing Together pens and a nice sticker here, Growing Together. This really helps promote the theme of our strategic plan. Compensation questions. Well, let me ask this question. Have we done a good job or good enough job getting information out and getting feedback from staff and providing opportunities? And if not, what else? Thank you. Are any other suggestions? I mean, we want to ensure that we hear from our staff. You know, our teachers, administrators, and our support staff, you have a huge impact, as I said earlier, on our young folks. And our teachers, next to parents, you have the greatest influence, the greatest impact on the outcome of our students' success. Yes, sir. Chris?
One question I have is just sort of in response to what Scott was presenting on in terms of the governor's budget. Are there opportunities for employees to go out and go help the legislature make a good decision about education funding? Is there an opportunity to testify as we think about something that is sustainable? What opportunities are there to sort of appeal to lawmakers on that budget? Well, I just wonder if the district might put together some sort of some guidelines or some guidance, and perhaps a timeline on when it's appropriate for people to do that. Thank you.
Yes. Anyone else? Any other suggestions? Yes.
And we have this conversation all the time as a department. For those of us that have been here through the turmoil that we had, our pay was frozen, and we did get some of that back, which is great. And also, kudos to you for coming out and answering questions, because we haven't seen that before in quite some time either. But one of the things that we have talked about is once the salary schedule disappeared, lots of us that had frozen pay, we were seeing colleagues in the upper pay bands being hired with a higher salary than what we were having being in the district for 10 or 12 years. And that was frustrating. And the big elephant in the room is it's math and science. They were up in the higher pay band, and they were getting original first-year contracts in the district, although they had however many years teaching experience. But there's a big gap in between those of us in the lowest pay band, because that was, in theory, more valuable. These people were much more valuable teachers than the ones. And I don't think that anybody in here agreed with that. But there is this big gap, and we're wondering how we can shrink that gap for those of us that have been in the lowest pay band. I mean, a 3.5% raise is great across the board, but again, those people that are making more than us, their 3% is obviously more than what we're getting. So we're wondering how you guys plan on shrinking that gap for those of us that have had to kind of sit through these difficult times.
Well, first, I want to thank you and all of our colleagues who weathered the storm and stayed with the district, who showed your commitment to our students. Thank you, because we know that our staff members who have the history in the district, certainly have the knowledge in the district, and have built the relationships with our kids, have a big, profound impact on our students' achievement. So thank you for that. You did mention the board last year before. Our current board and the board that just changed took first steps in trying to address what we call the compression, when we have forced people into pay bands and paid people for different types of jobs. That certainly has caused some issues with us. But I can certainly guarantee you, your Board of Education, your cabinet members, Scott and I, are committed to addressing it. And again, we say over and over again, it's going to take us a while to address it. And our community members, with the passage of 5A and 5B, that was historic. That was monumental in allowing us to have additional funds to start to close those gaps. So I ask our people to stay with us, continue. We were going to continue to raise achievement here in the district, student achievement here in the district, and we'll show our community members a huge return on investment, and that huge return on investment is about their children. And I have no doubt our community members will support us when we come to them at reasonable times and ask and have reasonable requests. Any other questions? Okay, anything you want to talk about? Thanks, John. John is taking the mic over. John, we want to thank you and Castle Rock Middle School for hosting us tonight. Let's give John and CRM a call. Round of applause.
Just a quick question. The decline in the governor's budget, Scott. So what do we know the factors or the reasons behind the decline?
Yes and no. I mean, I think a few things, right? Structurally, Colorado is very different than other states, right? I mean, at the high level, Colorado is a balanced budget state, right? Which is this year's revenue need to pay for this year's expenditures in the simplest terms, right? We have constitutional constraints that other states don't have. I think that's at a high level. But when you start to drill down further, K-12 is the biggest single piece of the budget. So when it's time to make the math work, right, you can pull a lot of really small levers, or you can pull one big one. I think as you start to see, without getting into people's political opinions and all sorts of things, is that the last legislative session was pretty expensive. There have been articles written on it, right, and there's a lot of commitments that need to be funded, right? And we saw a big investment in K-12 last year, right? Full-day kindergarten was one of them. There was a good increase in per-pupil revenue. There are other legislative priorities. As much as I wish K-12 was, what everyone focused on first, there are other things they want to accomplish as well. So I think it's a bunch of those factors, right? That there are new programs being funded, that there are programs within K-12 that are getting funded. We're seeing a proposal this year to fund more slots for early childhood for at-risk students. That wasn't in the budget last year. So there's just a lot of competing priorities in a fixed pie. And so I think our legislators and our governor are trying to do their best to work within that pie, but making sure that they're funding things not just in K-12. But I think it's a reasonable, way to look at it of, we're not in a recession now and it's continuing to get smaller. So we need to make sure that we're very prudent. I would say, and I've said this to Dr. Tugger, is now is not the time to bet the farm because, right, we've been in economic expansion for 10 years. That doesn't continue in perpetuity. So we just need to be prepared and be prudent with our money. It's no cause to panic. The sky is not falling. But at the same time, kind of the indicators are there that things are slowing down a little bit, especially with funding as it comes to K-12. So I just want to make sure from my role that, I don't look at the budget necessarily on a year-to-year basis. Of course, that is, what we need to invest in any one year. But 5-10 years, how do we have a sustainable practice? Because we don't want to get back to the spot where we have pay freezes, right? Or we don't want to get to a spot where we have to have a reduction in force, those types of things. Of course, that's not on the table now. If I do my job well, hopefully that's not on the table in the future. Of course, there are things that are out of my control. But we want to make sure we take a long-term view. We want to make sure, again, as Mary said, that you'll hear predictable and sustainable and systemic over and over and over again, because we don't want to put something in and then in year one not be able to fund it. So,
Scott, I'll add two things. One, we take great pride in providing an outstanding education for each of our 68,000 students. We also take great pride in being outstanding stewards of the taxpayers' dollars. Our financial department, Scott's department, has won quite a few accolades. We're one of only 6 districts, I believe, in the state with the highest credit rating available. And we've been able to leverage that money. As I said, we were able to go out in November to have no increased taxes, no new millage on our bond. And we plan whenever that happens again, we don't know yet. Hopefully it's a long time, but whenever we do go out, we want to make sure that we're able to get new bond money without increasing our taxpayers' increasing our taxes. So we take great pride in being great stewards of our resources as well. I mean, look at this building here. Our folks have done a great job in it, and we're certainly happy with those bond funds to be able to beautify and improve our campuses. We have 91 campuses, and each building in the district has received some upgrades, and so we're, again, happy about that as well. Any other questions or concerns before? Oh, I see Aaron is reaching for the mic. Aaron, do you have a question? Okay, Dr. Kaur? All right, okay. All right, well, if we don't have any other questions, concerns, or comments, we're going to go to our feedback session. We're going to ask Mary to come up, and she's going to talk about a few guidelines. Again, this is our, sure.
So my daughter actually goes to this school, and this year they cut the transportation for after-school athletics. So students no longer have a bus ride to a cross-country meet or a football game or whatever it is. And my wife is a teacher as well in the district, and she gets out at 4. I coach as well. I don't really have an opportunity to come and take my student to her cross-country meet, or lots of other people. And we are now, we're stuck in this boat of trying to find other parents to get our kids to their events. And I think that's really doing, and I don't know, obviously I don't know the funding or whatever, but I think we're doing a disservice to our kids, because I think we're cutting the amount of after-school activities that kids can participate in if we're responsible for getting our kids. I don't mind, I have time to pick them up, but getting them there right after school is an impossibility. And I think we're going to start losing kids in extracurricular activities after school if it's incumbent on the parents. At the high school level, I coach golf. Our kids have to get themselves to a golf tournament, or they have to get themselves to a baseball game or whatever. And at some point, something bad, I think, unfortunately, is going to happen where 4 or 5 kids are in a car going to a baseball game because we're not providing transportation. And I see that as an issue moving forward. I don't know what the answer is, but I think it's really detrimental to growing the extracurriculars and giving kids opportunities after school if we're responsible for getting our kids there. And so I don't know
I 100% agree with you, and I can guarantee you majority of our colleagues here stand with you. It is a disservice when we are not providing our students, our 68,000 students, ample opportunities to participate in extracurricular activities. We believe in the whole child. We believe in educating the whole child. We're not here as an institution that's pushing the over-testing of our kids. We want students to develop skills in the fine arts and in the performing arts. We want them to develop skills on the playgrounds. We want them to develop skills on the playing fields. And we are doing a disservice. We need to do a better job with transportation. However, with the passage of 5B, the bond, we're able to purchase, Scott, was it 60 new buses, I believe? Yeah, somewhere, and we've taken we're not where we need to be. We're not, but we've purchased somewhere in the neighborhood of 60 new buses. We have those buses up and going. We're not cannibalizing older buses to keep other buses on the roads. We want to ensure that the buses are safe, getting your daughter and our other kids to and from school safely. And we need to make sure that we have additional funds for here at Castle Rock Middle School and our other 90 campuses so we can get our kids to sporting events and back. And it shouldn't be based upon whether a parent can get a student to an event or back, whether he or she should participate. That breaks my heart. It breaks my heart that we're charging our kindergartners each day to come to and from school. But I am appreciative, again, of the passage of 5B. We have additional buses. We've increased the number of drivers that we have. Currently, we're down 12 drivers now. We hope to get actually 16 drivers. We hope to get those drivers back from leave. And also, we have some drivers on special assignment that will come back. And hopefully, they'll be here at Castle Rock Middle School to get your daughter to some of the events she's participating. Okay. That's going to wrap it up. I see a microphone in Dr. Kaur's hand. Okay, he's just holding the microphone. Thank you, Dr. Kaur. Okay, that's going to wrap it up. We're going to turn it over to Mary. She's going to give some guidelines for the feedback. And folks, this is just the beginning. This is just a beginning conversation in our regions with me for this year. All our events will be live streamed. Nate, want to thank you and the communications department. Let's give them a round of applause for, yes, getting this information out to our community members who can't be here. And so now we'll turn it over to Mary.
All right, if you're a licensed employee, can we make sure that you got the goldenrod colored handout when you came in? I see one over here. And we want to make sure that you all have some index cards to write on as well. We're really hoping to get a lot of verbal feedback in these feedback sessions, but we understand that sometimes it's a little uncomfortable to speak in public and say exactly what you're feeling. So we'll provide index cards for you to write anything that you might feel is not appropriate or you're not comfortable sharing in this group session. We really want to hear this feedback. We're hoping to have a good conversation about this. We're going to be reviewing a couple of samples of salary structures that resemble some structures that exist in our neighboring districts. And we're going to propose some other examples, other things that could go into a compensation structure that you might want to weigh in on as well. We're not going to adjourn to classrooms because we have a small group. Yes.